ไลฟ์แล้ว Okay, let me send the link on Slack. It's live แล้ว live แล้ว Yeah. Yes, that's why I'm going. Yeah. Yes, that's why I'm going. Winter is monitoring, right? Okay. No, everything is fine. Yeah, it's oh. ยังค่ะ So we're just waiting for So we're just waiting for.
Welcome, everyone. Apologies for the short delay in our start time, but on behalf of YCR, I'd like to welcome everyone to the launch of YCR's report, the Youth Congress Rohingya report. This persecution is the worst there is. Restrictions on Rohingya freedom of movement. Welcome, everyone. Apologies for the short delay in our Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. YCR, on behalf of those of you who are unfamiliar with the organization, is a Rohingya refugee-led John Quinley, Director of Fortified Rights, an independent nonprofit human rights organization based in Southeast Asia. Joining us hopefully shortly is Dr. Sasa, serving Union Minister for the International Cooperation in the National Unity Government of Myanmar. He's having a few connectivity issues, but we hope he'll be with us soon. Additionally, today with us was supposed to be Hafsa Tami Suden, a refugee and the Co-Secretary General at the Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network. She was scheduled to join us today, but unfortunately had to cancel due to unanticipated travel. But she has kindly recorded a statement that we will be able to share later on in the event. Following our panel discussion, there will be an opportunity for those joining the call to share their questions. Please share in the chat box or on the Fort Facebook page. Our Fort team will be monitoring both, and hopefully we'll be able to share questions at that time. Please note that today's program will be conducted entirely in English. A Rohingya language launch is scheduled for next Friday, September 29th at 3 p.m. Bangladesh time. We wanted to share, the YCR team wanted us to share that they opted to host the Rohingya language launch after the English launch to provide time for a Rohingya language translator to produce a high-quality translation. We do, however, welcome many members of the Rohingya community with us today, and we encourage everyone present on the call to help Rohingya friends, colleagues, and community to join next week's launch, as this report was written for them. So at this point, I would like to hand this over to the Fort team, who will play a short video commissioned by the Youth Rohingya Congress. After the video, Andrew Riley, advisor to YCR, will present key findings from the research on behalf of the YCR research team. So with that, over to the Fort team.
Conditions in the world's largest refugee camps are worse than ever. The Rohingya fled genocidal violence in Myanmar. Inhumane conditions in Bangladesh and a lack of international action pushed the Rohingya themselves to document ongoing rights violations and violence. This is Samira's story.
My husband was killed in Myanmar, so I came to Bangladesh to save my son's life. One day, he was stopped at a jail. Tosha, I had a stroke. If I were to pass away, no one would be left to take care of my children. Persecution is the worst there is.
Stories like this happen every day in the camps. The government prohibits leaving the camps, gathering, vehicles, being out after curfew, and working. These policies are executed by an abusive police force, the APBN. They use tactics like severe physical and sexual violence, extortion, theft of cash and property, forced labor, and public humiliation to do whatever they want. This offends most aspects of Rohingya life, including physical and mental health, safety and security, livelihoods, food and material needs, education, and religious and cultural practices. The Rohingya are demanding urgent change. Follow the link in bio to learn more about the study and how to take action.
Thanks, Cara, for the introduction to the event and the Fort for playing that video. I'm going to go ahead and start a PowerPoint presentation of the results. I think everyone should be able to see my screen now. My name is Andrew Riley, and I've been serving as a volunteer research advisor for this project, and I'll be sharing the results of the study. I really want to start at the top by acknowledging Youth Congress Rohingya, the organization that conducted this research. The YCR organizers of this study saw what was happening in the camps, and they also saw the lack of accountability and action from decision makers to improve the situation. As members of the Rohingya community, they themselves decided that they needed to initiate, lead, design, and implement this study, a fully Rohingya project, and I think it's an effort that the whole Rohingya community can take pride in. As you might expect, security was a very large concern throughout the study, considering the sensitive topic. The team constantly was discussing how to safely navigate checkpoints, including small details like how much money they should carry, what clothes they should wear, how to pass through checkpoints with minimal attention from the police. Because of the security concerns, the YCR team knew that they wouldn't be able to be publicly associated with this research, which to me, kind of being alongside them in their process, I think it really reflects their motivation. I mean, they didn't initiate this study for the accolades, for the attention, for the likes, the retweets, or for their names to be published. They knew that they would be completely invisible in this project, and they simply wanted to do something that would improve the situation in the camps for the whole community. And they put themselves at risk to do that. So I think it's good to honor their efforts here at the top. And I wanted to read a quote from the project coordinator who said, "I'm grateful to have been part of the team that worked on this important study. I wish I could be there to celebrate this important milestone with you all, but I'm confident that the event will be a success. While I'm unable to join the report launch due to security concerns, I'm very disappointed for that. I'm excited to see the report published and to share its findings with the world. Thank you to all who have supported this study. I wish you all the best for the event." I also want to acknowledge that the YCR team also recruited some volunteer international researchers to provide support, including Haley Ritzema and Nikki Stoneman, who provided an immense amount of support throughout the project as well. And one last thing that I want to note here before we move forward with the findings is that YCR has shared the findings and recommendations with several Government of Bangladesh ministries and is attempting to set up meetings with the Government of Bangladesh through proxies to discuss what movement can be made to improve the situation. Okay, now to dig in a little bit to the study and the results. I don't want to spend too much time on methods, but I do want to note a couple of important elements here. The first thing is that YCR used a participatory action research approach. This approach sees the community as the experts. It's an approach that acknowledges that Rohingya are the experts in their own community, their own culture, their customs, their language, the camps, their lifestyle, and that they are the ones who are best placed to conduct research on Rohingya issues. The YCR team interviewed 295 Rohingya respondents. Those were 241 surveys and 54 qualitative interviews, an immense amount of very valuable and insightful qualitative data. Data was collected in almost all refugee camps. There was 30 refugee camps, and you can see a map here on the screen of the data collection sites. It's really important to emphasize the very high quality of research conducted by this Rohingya team. For the survey specifically, the team used rigorous random selection methods to ensure that findings were representative of the larger populations. When we look at these results, it's not just about which makes this an extremely powerful study. The team also wanted to get the perspective of APBN working in the camps, so they managed to conduct interviews with 4 APBN officers working in the camps. We'll be presenting some of their perspectives in this presentation. And then I also wanted to acknowledge before we move forward that all names used in the report and in this presentation are pseudonyms, both for the Rohingya respondents and for the APBN officers. I won't be able to present all of YCR's findings, but we'll try to give an overview of some of the highlights, and then you'll have to see the report for all of the important details. So the first thing I want to present is YCR asked respondents about movement restrictions and policies that were in place. Some of the two most common findings were prohibitions against leaving the camps and increased difficulty moving within the camps. I'm going to put a table up on the screen here. You can see YCR asked about 3 different levels of movement: the ability to move within someone's own camp, the ability to move from one camp to another, and the ability to move outside of the camp to other towns. And ideally, we would see that 100% were able to move extremely between all of these. We asked about 4 different levels of movement here. Unable to move at all, a little bit, quite a bit, and extremely. But you can see that for moving outside of the camp to other towns, 40% were unable to move at all. And then Rohingya had also quite a bit of difficulty, able to move only a little bit from one camp to another. You might be thinking, okay, well, if 40% weren't able to move at all, that means 60% have freedom of movement. And I would say that considering the results of this study and putting this in context, that's not exactly what this means. 40% means that there are 40% of Rohingya who are unable to afford the extortion to leave the camps. They're unable to secure permission, even in dire circumstances. They're unable to circumvent checkpoints by crawling under fences. These are 40% of the population that is completely unable to leave the camps. That does not mean that the other 60% have freedom of movement. It means that they face barriers to movement and that they can navigate those barriers effectively sometimes, but that does not equal freedom of movement. YCR also found that curfews are prevalent throughout the camp. So in this context, that means not being able to leave their shelters between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. There are restrictions on assembly, both informally in small groups of friends and also for large events. There's a ban on vehicles, and there are vehicles that circulate in the camps, but all of these have to pay bribes to the authorities to be able to enter and circulate in the camps. There are prohibitions on work, both within and outside of the camps. Prohibitions on smartphones and laptops. And the last thing that I want to note on all of these restrictions is that APBN officers confirmed that these restrictions reflect official policy and government orders. And we were pretty surprised to hear them saying that. Many respondents compared the living situation in Bangladesh with living conditions in Myanmar, and many thought that the conditions in the camps were similar to or worse than living conditions in Myanmar prior to this 2017 violence. This is not to equate what's happening in Bangladesh to the genocide that's happening in Myanmar. Simply stated, Rohingya respondents were telling us that in terms of daily living circumstances, persecution experienced at the hands of APBN, many of the Rohingya that we talked to thought that the daily living situation now in Bangladesh was similar to or worse than the situation in Myanmar prior to the violence. Specifically, 65% thought that movement restrictions that they face in Bangladesh are worse than those that they experienced in Myanmar. YCR also asked respondents about the reasons for these restrictions. Why are they in place? Rohingya were aware of the government narrative that these restrictions are necessary to protect Rohingya and secure the camps, but Rohingya respondents thought that the narrative was disingenuous, primarily because of how the government restricts and violates their rights in other ways. 72% of Rohingya who were interviewed thought restrictions were meant to coerce them to leave the camps and return to Myanmar, as has happened historically in Bangladesh. So the idea being that restrictions are making the camps unlivable and that they will be coerced to return to Myanmar or perhaps to be resettled on Basan Char Island and other camps. Okay, I just wanted to share with you a quote from one of the respondents to our study. This is from Safika, a 35-year-old Rohingya woman who spoke on these issues. She said, "In Myanmar, we were kept underprivileged by the government. Our children didn't have a chance to study. We weren't allowed to have income sources. Neither did we have freedom of movement, and we couldn't live there peacefully. We are going through the same discrimination and violence here as well. Our children are not allowed to study. We aren't allowed to do any business or have income sources. If innocent people sit together to chat with one another, the police accuse them of being criminals and they are imprisoned after being tortured. I think the government has imposed these restrictions and violence to make our life so miserable that we return to our country the same way we fled here." YCR also asked about how movement restrictions were enforced and who enforced them. So 62% of Rohingya experienced punishment or punitive measures related to movement. And 96% reported APBN, the Armed Police Battalion, as the actor that punished them for movement. You can see here, like all of the other enforcement actors in the camps, the percentages are negligible compared to APBN. So after extortion, which we'll talk about in a bit, violence was one of the most reported enforcement measures by Rohingya respondents. So beatings with sticks or rods were reported as commonly occurring at checkpoints, along roads, or within the camps. Respondents reported that beatings could be pretty extreme, resulting in severe or permanent injuries, and could occur for a wide range of reasons, including attempting to leave or enter the camp, attempting to transport items into the camp. Beatings could also be inflicted for something as innocuous as asking police the reason they were being denied exit from the camp, or in some cases for even fervently requesting or begging to be allowed to exit the camp for an emergency. Women often reported a sexual violence perpetrated by APBN, including sexual harassment, often due to inappropriate searching techniques or removal of clothing, but also reported sexual abuse and rape as well. Respondents also reported that they could be detained at checkpoints for several hours. Some respondents reported being forced to wait in the sun. Some were put in situations of suffering while being detained, such as being forced to stare at the sun or being forced to do time-consuming, meaningless tasks while being detained. Physical infrastructure plays a really important role in enforcement. So barbed wire fences surround all the camps, and the fencing funnels people to the checkpoints where they often face the additional violence and extortion that we've already been discussing when they're trying to leave the camp. Rohingya respondents also reported forced labor, similar to being forced to serve the night watch in Myanmar, which was a common practice. One man from each household is forced to serve sentry duty in the camps every 10 days. So at night, the men are responsible for guarding the camp in charge offices, APBN, checkposts, and the camps in general. Rohingya respondents had different reactions to this. Some respondents called it slave labor, and others expressed the irony that they were being forced to guard the very group that's oppressing them and is also supposed to be responsible for their safety. Okay, YCR asked respondents about corruption in the camps, particularly in the operation of security forces. Almost all Rohingya knew of or had experienced corruption by security forces. You can see here 98%. This often included falsifying evidence, such as planting drugs or false evidence on a person, or sometimes installing illicit applications on their phone or accusing them of being involved in crime or armed groups. Usually the false accusations were used as a way to elicit further bribes from people that they had detained. Confiscation of goods, money, and phones was often reported. Other essentials were often also confiscated as a way to further extort Rohingya as well. As a side note here, the authorities destroyed the markets in the camps previously, which forces Rohingya to interact more with authorities when attempting to access outside markets because they have to cross through the checkpoints to do so, and it exposes them to more violence and extortion. Okay, extortion was likely the most prominent theme of the research. Rohingya reported needing to pay bribes to accomplish many aspects of basic functioning, including crossing checkpoints, working, transporting necessities, seeking healthcare, carrying a mobile phone, holding weddings or funerals, participating in religious life. When we were asking, or when YCR was asking Rohingya the reasons they thought restrictions exist, a common theme was that restrictions exist solely for APBN to make money. The restrictions enable APBN to constantly be extorting Rohingya because Rohingya are forced to break the restrictions in order to survive. Really quickly, I wanted to read from an interview with one of the APBN officers along these lines. So this is with Hussein, an APB officer working in the camps. Question: how much money can police make by taking money from Rohingya in a single month? Hussein: we get a fixed salary according to our position, but if a corrupted constable takes money from Rohingya, he can earn 200 to 500 Bangladeshi taka per day. If a sub-inspector tries to extort money, he can earn more than a constable because his level is higher than a constable. I think he can earn about 1,000 to 2,000 Bangladeshi taka. If an officer in charge tries to extort, he can make more than a sub-inspector. I'm not exactly sure of the amount, but I'm estimating it through the information I received. He went on to say, I have not taken money directly from Rohingya, but sometimes my colleagues take money from them and they give me some of it, or we spend that money on snacks and coffee costs. Question: we heard that Rohingya are beaten at checkpoints. Does this happen often and why? Hussein: some police beat the Rohingya when the person can't tell the police why they are leaving the camp or if the police find something illegal on the person. There are some Rohingya who verbally abuse the police when they are not allowed to go outside the camp. When Rohingya people respond badly, the police get angry and the police might hit them with a stick. Question, have you ever beaten a Rohingya person? Hussein, no, I never beat Rohingya, but I threaten them sometimes. YCR asked respondents about how movement restrictions are impacting Rohingya lives in the camp. And from a broader perspective, the research found that restrictions are making the camp less safe because as Rohingya are more and more restricted, they become increasingly desperate. Infrastructure and restrictions on movement can be life-threatening for those with emergencies. Many of us have been following and seeing the frequent campfires and the fences that prevent Rohingya from fleeing to safety. But it's also true that for those with medical emergencies, the restrictions can also be life-threatening if they're not allowed to rapidly seek health care. Restrictions have a gendered impact. Women are targeted more for sexual abuse at checkpoints and are less able to circumvent restrictions, such as by crawling under fences or running from authorities. There's an entire section in the report about the gendered impact of restrictions with a lot more details on this. Rohingya often provided their reflections on the restrictions and expressed that restrictions often made them feel like they were being treated like animals in Bangladesh and not given the dignity of human beings. This came up over and over again, the dehumanization that results from these restrictions. Others expressed profound hopelessness and psychological pain. Multiple respondents discussed the idea of ending their own lives as the only escape for the persecution. So Fatima, a 35-year-old Rohingya woman, shared, they said that these restrictions are in place because we are provided with rations and we don't need to move outside the camps or make money for ourselves. I think the purpose of the restrictions is to force us to commit suicide and die here. Some Rohingya respondents expressed frustration that humanitarian organizations like UNHCR and others witness these abuses daily in the camps. And they are not aware, the Rohingya community is not aware of efforts to push back or advocate for changes in the camps. Lastly, YCR asked about a number of different areas of daily life and how restrictions impact those areas of daily life. So you can see here, we have high, low, and no impact from restrictions, the scale. And on the left side, we have a number of different areas of daily life. So ideally, we would see no impact from restrictions, and ideally, we would like to see 100% in the green column. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We can see that for experiencing emotional distress, impact of movement restrictions was very high. 93.7% of respondents said there was a high impact from movement restrictions on emotional distress. Similarly, with expressing opinions openly and publicly, 89.2%, ability to access healthcare, ability to access work or livelihood opportunities, elevating the risk of diseases and their consequences, ability to meet family and friends, ability to meet daily consumption needs, ability to participate in cultural traditions and practices, ability to access education, ability to practice religion, so on and so forth. You can see that the majority of respondents endorsed a high impact from education through the entire list. There's a high impact of these restrictions on almost all areas of Rohingya life. I just want to note here that YCR, based on these findings, has offered 39 detailed recommendations to the government of Bangladesh, the international community, and the humanitarian organizations working in Bangladesh. The recommendations, I think, having looked at them and talked to YCR about them, are unique. They're really coming from a Rohingya lens. They really involve strengthening Rohingya communities. There are some really detailed recommendations. There are some broader recommendations. But if you're going to have a look at the report, I would highly recommend going to the end and looking through the recommendations, as we don't have time to go through all of them here. As I wrap up, I just wanted to share one last quote from Kareem, a 27-year-old Rohingya man. This quote really impacted a lot of the team who was working on this study and really summed up the sentiments of the many other Rohingya that were spoken to. Kareem said, "If a foreigner comes to visit the Rohingyas here, he will find that Rohingya people are very thin and with faces resembling the impacts of their poor mental state. Because people without good mental health don't look good physically, and they can't grow physically as well. You can spot the difference immediately. If you bring 10 Rohingya and 10 Bangladeshis closely standing together, you can immediately say who are the Rohingya by their poor physical appearance. Because the difference between the two groups is one has a country that they can call home and have all the rights as human beings, and the other has nothing like that. Thanks so much for listening to these important findings. I'm going to pass it back over to Kara to initiate the panel discussion.
Thank you, Andrew, for that comprehensive review of the research finding. Also for sharing those very powerful stories. I think having that element really allows us to understand the significance of the findings and how they're really impacting on the lives of Rohingya community in Bangladesh. As you noted, it is unfortunate that the research team can't be with us here today, but we're very grateful to have you with us to share these important findings and frankly, distressing findings and stories. So moving into the second part of our program, with us today are some guests who each offer a unique perspective on the extreme challenges the Rohingya are facing in Cox's Bazar, and as well as the responsibility and potential for stakeholders, including the governments of Bangladesh, Myanmar, donor countries, and the broader international community to respond. With us today from the Rohingya community, we have Nasan Lwin. Born in Buritam, Nasan Lwin is a prominent Rohingya activist who has spent over 22 years drawing attention to human rights abuses and military campaigns in Myanmar's Arakan state. He is also the co-founder of the Free Rohingya Coalition. From Fortify Rights, we have with us John Quinley. John has been with Fortify Rights since 2016. He holds qualifications from the Refugee Studies Center at Oxford University and the International Genocide and Human Rights Studies Center in Canada, and has been a strong supporter of community-driven research. Representing the National Unity Government of Myanmar, we had hoped to have with us Dr. Sasa, who is the Union Minister for International Cooperation. He has been instrumental in leading diplomatic efforts to draw attention to Myanmar's deepening crisis, while advocating for an inclusive federal democratic Myanmar. Dr. Sasa is having some connectivity issues, but the FORT team is working diligently with him, and hopefully he'll be able to join us partway through the panel discussion. And with sending regrets today is Hasfa Tamesudan, the Co-Secretary General of the Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network and a registered social worker. Her colleague, Klaus, is with us on the call, I believe, and Hafsa has also recorded a statement which we will be able to share with everyone joining the call today. So to begin the discussion portion of our agenda, also just a reminder to those that are joining the call, please feel free to note questions in the Q&A session in the webinar, as well as on the FORT Facebook page. We'll be collecting questions, and towards the end of the program, our panelists will be able, and Andrew Riley will be able to field some of those questions. So to start things off, I'd like to direct our first question to Nasan Lwin. The findings that Andrew has just laid out for us really highlight the restrictions imposed in the camp by the government of Bangladesh, and point to the fact that things have been very difficult and just continue to deteriorate further. YCR is calling for donor governments like the US, UK, Canada, and others to hold Bangladesh accountable for making the camps unlivable. From your point of view, what are some of the practical steps that you think donor governments can take to pressure the government of Bangladesh to start changing these policies and improving conditions in the camp?
Thank you, Kara. Can you all hear me well? Yeah, all right. Yeah, hello, everyone. First, I would like to thank you for inviting me to speak at this important report launch. Second, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizer of this event. And a huge thank to Andrew, Harley, and everyone involved for their support in completing this report. Your efforts are greatly appreciated. Before answering the question, let me speak a bit. As the Youth Congress Rohingya YCR stated in their report, A person cannot be helped without knowing their need. The Rohingya people need to be able to speak for themselves. This report make me really proud of. While I appreciate all human rights organizations for speaking out for us, we must take the initiative and get support from all sympathizers. I have been dreaming of that for a long time, and today YCR make it a reality. I sincerely appreciate. Thanks all YCR members who work very hard on this critical report. The first part of the report, Andrew also presented this story. The story of the Samira share how her 16 years old son was tortured at a checkpoint. Many other similar stories exist. Many innocent people are accused, tortured, extorted, and imprisoned by the Armed Police Battalion known as APBN. And in the first of the report, there is also a statement of YCR is essential for understanding the need of Rohingya genocide survivor in the camp of Bangladesh. Since the early 1990s, Myanmar has imposed several restrictions on the Rohingya. In Rakhine State or Arakan State, the only Rohingya are targeted and required to comply with this rule, while members of other community are not subjected to the same restriction. The Rohingya fled Myanmar due to a genocidal campaign, and it is disappointing that they face similar restriction in the camp where they await justice and dignified restriction. Dignified repatriation. As an activist, I have extensive knowledge of the persecution of the Rohingya in Myanmar, and it would not be unfair to draw a comparison between the persecution of Rohingya by the Armed Police Battalion APBN in Bangladesh camp and the action of Nasaka or the Boragat forces and Boragat Police BGP in Arakan, as the type of persecution are the same. I am not simply speaking from reading this report. I am well informed about the situation. I am in contact with many refugees facing persecution in the camp. Additionally, I have personal experience with how innocent refugees and criminals are treated differently by the APBN. A few weeks ago, the Human Rights Watch released a short report highlighting how the APBN collaborate with criminals. I learned about this when a Rohingya refugee was abducted, and I attempt to intervene the situation by speaking to two APBN commanders. They are the top commander in the camp. Unfortunately, the criminal resolved the situation through bribery, and the young man who had been abducted had to live in the jungle for months until he was released. So now, I will now answer your question. Diplomatic engagement is very important to change the situation. All donor countries have embassy or mission in Dhaka. They can start a diplomatic dialogue with Bangladesh government and express their concern and expectation. They can ask the government to return the situation to what it was like 3-4 years ago. This was mentioned in the report as well. Many respondents said they had the peace 3-4 years ago. One thing I would like to highlight is I believe that the government imposed all this restriction based on the information they received from the lower level, I mean the local level authorities. My idea is that it is crucial for the Rohingya refugee to engage with higher authority, including the Prime Minister's office, Foreign Office, and the Home Office. For this, representation is very important. There are dozens of community-based organizations. All of them are doing their work, but they need to form a coalition or an alliance and elect representative who will seriously raise their voice. I know what is going on there, so I will be very frank and honest. The representation must be elected by the Rohingya themselves, not handpicked by the local level authority or any other external actors. And the Rohingya representation body will coordinate with the representative of donor country, UN agency based in Dhaka, and they all have to engage with higher authority of Bangladesh, I mean, including the Rohingya representation body. So this YCI and many respondents in the report, they said they want Bangladesh army in the camp. They don't want to suffer under APBN anymore. This should be considered a top priority. When the Rohingya fled from Myanmar in 2017, many army officers went to the border area, welcomed us, helped us a lot. They were in the camp for almost 3 years, and none of the refugee complaints against them. The refugee had peace when the army was in the camp. I myself visited many times to the camp. When the army was there, nobody told me they are suffering, like they are living there like normal. So as they are facing brutality by the APBN, they believe that they will be protected if the Bangladeshi army is deployed again in the camp. This is what the Rohingya want. Beside this report, I spoke with many people in the camp, and they all said they wanted the Bangladesh army in the camp. So I think once the army is in the camp, the criminal will not have much space in the camp. The refugees are suffering from two groups. One is APBN and another is the criminal group. There are many other recommendations in this report, but removing APBN from the camp and deploying the Bangladesh army in the camp is a lot of suffering. And the refugees are not asking much. They are only asking for some freedom of movement. They are not asking to be settled in Chittagong or Dhaka. So the international community and the Rohingya representation, if they make some effort, I hope that the government will agree, and the government also will have the voices from different group, not only the report from the lower authority level, so they can revise their policy, all this restriction, and they will have the first-hand account from the refugee as well, the recommendation from the international community. I think all this together, the situation will change. And the most important we should note is this government gave us the shelter for our survival, and we are very grateful for that, and we will not forget what the Bangladesh has done for us. But unfortunately, we are facing this situation. I have a lot of hope that after listening to our representation, Rohingya representation body, and this representative of the donor country, and also the UN agency, I think the situation will improve but at least we should try, because we didn't try before that. It is very important for us to advocate for ourselves and talk to the higher authority. Then maybe the situation will change. So this is all of what I want to suggest to the YCR and my fellow brother and sister in the camp. So we need the serious advocacy to change the situation. Now we have said clearly that remove this APBN from the camp and bring back the Bangladesh army. So the people all also trust the Bangladesh army. So I think the government, this is the time to listen to what refugees are saying and honor their requests. That is all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan Nguyen, for your comments. I think you've highlighted some really important points. One being that the injustices that are highlighted in this report are not isolated. They're part of a long, unfortunate history of persecutions committed against the Rohingya community. You also very, I think, aptly note that a good portion of the report is focused on not just on criticism of the Bangladesh government, but also of some of the positive steps that they have taken towards supporting the Rohingya community, including the specific notation that of the militaries, of the call for actually the transfer of the security in the camps from the police back to the military, and the how many Rohingya felt much safer under military control of camp security. You also make an excellent point on regards to the importance of diplomatic pressures. And a question that has also come up from the audience is the note that was made earlier at the beginning of the program that the YCR has already taken actions towards engaging the Bangladesh government as well as other stakeholders. I'm wondering, Andrew, if you could comment briefly on what are the steps that have already been taken. Nathan Nguyen has highlighted the importance of Rohingya-led diplomacy, and I'm wondering if you could comment briefly on that.
Yeah, absolutely. YCR is really interested, as I mentioned in the presentation, really in just making a change on the ground. So they're engaging as many stakeholders as possible and really trying to brief anyone that is kind of a stakeholder or in a position of power related to the context. So they're looking forward to hopefully briefing Bangladesh government officials. That would be their number one target for advocacy, and that's something that they would like to move forward with. And that may not be face-to-face due to security issues, but through proxies, finding a way to disseminate messages back and forth and just try to find some common ground and have a conversation around that. But then also with donor governments in Bangladesh, with those governments potentially abroad, trying to discuss how maybe different actors can put pressure on the government of Bangladesh, but also praise them for the things that they're doing well, as you and Nathan Nguyen have both noted. And then also with humanitarian organizations in Cox's Bazar. And one of the big pushes is to kind of discuss with UNHCR, with different UN agencies on the ground, and with humanitarian organizations, what are some practical things that could be done on the ground. But YCR is really trying to engage with all actors on this.
Thank you, Andrew. And I see now that Dr. Sasa, our other panelist, has been able to join us. Welcome, Dr. Sasa. We're very happy to have you here with us. On the same theme of diplomacy, given that Rohingya are Myanmar people, I'm curious to know what steps can NUG take to advocate, excuse me, for better conditions for the Rohingya with the government of Bangladesh? If not with the government of Bangladesh, could the NUG advocate with the international community for better conditions in the refugee camps? Dr. Sasa.
Yeah, firstly, I just like to apologize all of you for technical problem. I have the last 45 minutes. I will try. Finally, I'm in. Yeah, thank you very much for helping me get in the Zoom. Because of maybe security reason, there's so many things that technically I am maybe out of date. So yes, firstly, I just like to say a huge thanks to Youth Congress of Rohingya for doing this marvelous work that you have done. You know, I have print out then, and I have really this open up our eyes and our ear, and then I will be taking this into more deeper with the NUG and see what can we do. I think that is, you know, a lot here. And I really, it brings my heart in many ways, and we should not be suffering like this anymore, actually, you know, in this 21st century. But here, you know, we are having this again and again. So this morning, I wake up at 4, I could not finish last night, so this morning, 4 a.m., I reading again, and I mean, it just really, you know, all the recommendation that you given to international community is something that we as NUG must consider as much as possible. And also recommendation that you give to Bangladesh government is very powerful, realistic, and practical. And to international community and humanitarian actors. So well done, yeah? You have done really good job despite of the challenge that you faced during, you know, this kind of research. I can only imagine the challenge and the obstacle you must face during this work. And so, yeah, that is the first, I just really like to say that from the bottom of my heart. I respect you, I salute you, and I really appreciate for all the hard work that YCR has done. I really recommend this. And so, yeah, as NUG, you know, we are working in different platforms, like ASEAN platform. And Indonesia, Malaysia, they are very, very strong advocate with us together when it comes to Rohingya crisis. And then we are continuously trying to do as much as possible with them in the same page and the same voice in terms of policy and position. And secondly, UN Security Council resolution, I'm sure you have all seen that. It was a touch base. Again, this is the first time in Myanmar history that UN Security Council resolution has been passed on Myanmar, the number of 2669. And that also directly or indirectly, touch with the Rohingya crisis. And the other one is NDAA Burma Act of United States of America that was made into law this year, actually, you know. And that Burma Act was really the beginning what Rohingya crisis was the beginner of, the starter of this Burma Act in America. So I think indirectly that also is the way where we can advocate together implementation of Burma Act and the AA. And it's so much I know that United States leaderships are very, very keen for us all to come together to see how can we implement that such kind of Burma Act of NDAA, maybe through Bangladesh or through Thailand or through our neighbor. And that is one of the way where we can, I think, really look more detailed. And the other is also, I mean, that within NUG, we have got many stakeholders. Like NUCC, NUG, CRPH, and ethnic revolutionary organizations. And it's very important for us to look into two directions. One is domestic level of advocacy. That is very crucial, I think. And the second one is, of course, international and our neighbor regional. And then I think in that way, we can really cooperate together with in that level. And also with the NUG, you know that we have, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. And I know that a lot of the talk here was so much about the area of those humanitarian and education and health issue. And then we will taking this into within NUG and see what can be done and what is the potential that we have in terms of that. And also I think the last point I like to make in this question is really it's not what is happening now is what is happening now, but for us to look at what's the root cause of this problem. So the root cause of Rohingya crisis is there. It is about discrimination. It is about crimes against humanity. It's about, exclusion. So, we have to build a future where Rohingya are included as a part of nation building. So I think that is the way how we have to look forward. And I, again, like to invite all of my brothers and sisters of Rohingya to come with us together and be a part of that nation building. We have to be first, eradicate these discriminatory policies and all these evil policies against humanity. And that means ending of this military dictatorship once for all. And then for us to build inclusive, central democratic future union where Rohingya are a part of that community, that nation, that union. So I think that is where we have to look. And I think with these questions, I open my arms again to all my Rohingya brothers and sisters now we have got 39 points of this report. And implementation of these will require all of us to cooperate as much as possible for the same future, for the same humanity.
Thank you, Dr. Sasa, for your comments and for highlighting that above all else, the primacy of respect for Rohingya human rights, the dignity of Rohingya people should be held at the highest degree. I think you mentioned, again, some very important points related to the need for us to rally as an international community and throw weight behind diplomatic efforts. I just want to circle to one of the top recommendations that were directed towards the international community in the report, that donor governments should end the current approach of government appeasement, prioritize the rights of Rohingya living in Bangladesh, and hold the Bangladesh government officials accountable for the abuses of Rohingya refugees. For me, this is an extremely powerful recommendation and really calls out one of these barriers that is limiting, let's say, diplomatic efforts to help protect Rohingya people in Bangladesh. A question to all of our panel members: what are some of the factors that influence this practice of government appeasement? What can be done to shift away from this towards a practice that prioritizes the rights of Rohingya and the rights of all people living in the camps? Again, a question to the panel, if anyone would like to take lead on that.
I can answer briefly, Kara. I think there's a lot of humanitarian groups in Cox's Bazar are worried about access, are worried about losing access. They do not speak publicly about the ongoing abuses related to APBN, the ongoing restrictions in the camps. UNHCR is also worried about losing access. And so I know behind the scenes has pushed the government to lift restrictions on movement and to hold perpetrators of abuses accountable, but have not been very public about these ongoing abuses in the camps. And even human rights groups that are working in Bangladesh self-censor. They're worried about getting their approvals from the NGOs Affairs Bureau. So human rights groups, international human rights groups, should speak more publicly about APBN abuses. This happened in Rakhine State. People stopped speaking about the abuses leading up to the 2016, 2017 violence. And so I think we need to learn lessons from the past, and human rights groups and humanitarian groups should be speaking more openly about the restrictions and cooperating with the authorities to lift them. And I think what YCR basically filled a huge gap because human rights groups, humanitarian, UNHCR were not speaking publicly. So the team at YCR filled this gap, did some really important documentation, and actually spoke publicly about it even in the midst of potential reprisals. And so that's a really courageous act that the Rohingya people did themselves.
Thank you, John. And building on what you've just shared, I think something else that the report really highlights is that it really lifts the veil on this perception and this prevailing argument that all of Rohingya's needs, all of the Rohingya community's needs are met within the camps. And by really highlighting the severe gaps in terms of services, as well as in terms of protection, it opens up that door for greater advocacy in terms of protection at the government level. So thank you. Thank you so much. Again, so maybe a question actually to John again, since you joined us. The YCR documented severe restrictions on Rohingya in the camps and high levels of violence and extortion, some shocking stories of extortion by APBN in the enforcement of these specific restrictions. Are these findings in line with data gathered by Fortify Rights independently? And could you comment briefly on what Bangladesh's obligations are to the Rohingya under international human rights law, and whether or not the government of Bangladesh is in violation of these obligations?
Yeah, thank you, Kara. YCR's report is one of the most comprehensive reports that has been released to date on the restrictions. They've gathered mass amounts of information related to these restrictions. Fortify Rights documentation aligns with YCR's research. For example, in August, just last month of this year, we released a report and research that found that members of APBN arbitrarily detained and tortured Rohingya refugees while systematically demanding corrupt payments from them that amount to extortion. I was in Cox's Bazar this month, and every Rohingya person that I spoke to talked about the restrictions and talked about abuses from APBN. The abuses documented by YCR and Fortify Rights do violate Bangladesh's obligations under international law and domestic law. So, Bangladesh is a state party to the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. They're a state party to the Convention Against Torture, and they're also aligned with the UN Convention Against Corruption and other important regional and international law. ICCPR, for example, applies without distinction towards refugees or nationals of the country. And the ICCPR, which Bangladesh has ratified, allows for freedom of movement and guarantees the right to liberty. So the confinement, the mass arbitrary confinement of refugees to these camps is discriminatory, and it infringes on refugee rights. And Bangladesh should prevent the excessive securitization in the camps. YCR, as Andrew pointed out, has found that APBN has beat refugees, and those beatings amount to torture. And Bangladesh is a state party to the Convention Against Torture, CAT, which prohibits torture and requires accountability for perpetrators. That means accountability for police perpetrators. After Bangladesh ascension to CAT, Bangladesh enacted the Torture and Custodial Death Prevention Act in 2013, and that outlines investigations around torture, punishment around torture, witness protection, and compensation for survivors of torture. So I think Bangladesh has domestic law which prohibits torture and has also signed the CAT. In 2007, also Bangladesh acceded to legally binding UN Convention Against Corruption. And a lot of what's happening throughout the camps, and Sheikh Hasina has gone on record numerous times in public statements saying that Bangladesh really wants to crack down on corrupt officials and corruption in business, corruption in the police force. And so Bangladesh should really follow this and actually stamp out the corruption that happens in the camps. Bangladesh has done a lot already, and they could easily actually bring on a lot of the recommendations that YCR has outlined. Bangladesh, is really progressive when it comes to international accountability and has held and tried to hold perpetrators of atrocities in Myanmar accountable. They've allowed international accountability mechanisms access to the country. They've allowed the IIMM access to the country to collect and preserve evidence. The last year, they opened up third country resettlement pathways for refugees, very small numbers. So Bangladesh could do the right thing and can amend some of its mistakes and start allowing middle term and long-term solutions for refugees. That includes lifting the restrictions on movement, allowing formal education, allowing livelihoods, and actually just taking seriously the laws that they've already acceded to, international and domestic.
Thank you, John, for your comments. I think you've really nicely laid out the existing framework that can be used to really apply pressure on legally bound state actors. We also spoke earlier in the call about different recommendations that are coming from YCR in relation to what the Bangladesh government has been doing and could be doing. One particularly focused on returning the responsibility of security in the camps, redirecting it from the police back to the military. And we're seeing in the Q&A feed a lot of support for that recommendation. Another question that has come from the audience relates to humanitarian actors. So we've looked at what the government has done and could be doing. The same question is being raised of humanitarian actors. There has been a lot of criticism of organizations, including UN agencies like UNHCR. What is UNHCR doing that it should continue to do, and what could it do to improve conditions? And let me reframe more broadly, not just UNHCR, but humanitarian actors in general that are supporting the response. So this is a question from the audience directed to the entire panel.
I think some of the information that we had in the report related to this. So I do know that UNHCR is working to train APBN officers in a limited capacity, which is a great positive first step. I think it is a limited initiative so far. I'm not sure if that alone can make a systemic difference without some of the larger accountability mechanisms that John was just laying out. I also wanted to quickly on this mention that in the report, YCR asked Rohingya respondents if they believed that international organizations were working on improving conditions in the camp, and if they were working on advocating for changes to restrictions, specifically on freedom of movement. I would have to look at the exact numbers, and everyone can go to the report to look at this, but I believe it was over 60%, maybe between 60 and 80% said that they didn't believe that humanitarian agencies were working on these issues at all, or maybe that they were only working on them a little bit. So the perception from Rohingya on the ground is that this isn't happening. And maybe that's related to the fact that, like John was saying, humanitarian agencies are so worried about access that they're doing these things underground and a little bit undercover, quiet advocacy. But I've also worked for a number of humanitarian agencies in Cox's Bazar that I know for sure were not doing quiet advocacy and were not using the information that they had about what was happening on the ground for advocacy purposes. So I think the quiet advocacy argument can sometimes be a little bit of it can lend a little bit of a lack of accountability to agencies because no one is speaking out publicly. But at the same time, it is so difficult to speak out publicly. So it's a little bit of a difficult situation from the outside looking in.
Thank you, Andrew. Nasan Nguyen, I see you also nodding your head. Is there anything that you would like to add to that?
No, I'm not expert in this field. I don't really know what they are doing. I don't also, just Andrew said, the UNHCR is planning to train the APBN. I don't really encourage, because you can read everything in the report. I'm not just saying by reading this report, I know I have all the information. I have been, I have been in touch with many people. Those people are based in 34 camp. So APBN should be removed, instead of giving them training, because they know how to extort the Rohingya people. They know how to, they threaten, how to torture. They know everything. There are many people are in the jail on the false accusation made by this APBN. Full stop, finish. Enough is enough. They should be removed. I will not support this. The training them, because we had the peace. When I visited the camp, when the army was there, the people had the peace. These people, they are traumatized. They fled the genocide. They escaped the genocide, and their loved ones were killed. So they should have the peace. That the Bangladesh government, in the beginning, they provided them the peace, but based on maybe this all recommendation from the lower level, they want to make this business. This is the business. In the camp there is a big business going on. APBN is making money, criminals are making money. Who are suffering? These innocent refugees are suffering. So the government, the higher authority, even the prime minister herself, she should know very well what is going on in the camp. This is only the things I want to say, don't train the APBN. And also all the aid agency and the humanitarian organization, they should not keep silent. They know what is going on there in the camp. They should at least, diplomatically, they can advocate the government to ease the restriction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, humanitarian organizations and human rights organizations, we play different roles sometimes. So if a humanitarian organization is not able and doesn't feel like it can speak publicly, groups like YCR can take on information they have, can publicize it. Groups like Fortify Rights can listen to those humanitarian organizations. We can try to publicize it. So if humanitarian organizations have information, have data they want to make public, we can work together, because we play different roles and we understand that it's a difficult environment to work in Bangladesh. So just to kind of add on to what Nason Wen is saying, that we can hopefully work together in the future and try to make public some of the restrictions that they've also documented, because humanitarian groups are collecting huge amounts of data on a daily basis throughout the camps.
Well said, John. I think we need to highlight the fact that to be able to shift things and create change, it's going to take a coordinated effort, and being able to use the different tools that we have. I know there are some comments in the Q&A about wanting to know more about YCR, who they are, who they're led by. And they, just to note that they are not a public-facing organization for security reasons. And this webinar is an example of this coordination and collaboration that John's highlighting. They are able, as Andrew highlighted, to be able to understand the nuances of the conditions in the camp better than anyone else, but are not in a position to be able to share those findings publicly, which is why this community of people have come together to be able to work hand in hand, to be able to push those findings forward in a coordinated advocacy campaign, which this information session is a part of. So thank you for that comment. At this point, we'd like to share a video statement that was recorded by Hafsa Tamisuddin, who is the co-secretary of APRIN, the Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network. She was supposed to be with us today, but due to unanticipated travel, had to cancel. Fort team, do we have her video lined up and ready to share?
Good morning, everyone. Greetings from Melbourne. My name is Hafsa Tamizuddin. I am one of the Rohingya diaspora advocates. I'm also one of the co-secretary general of Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network. My sincere apologies that I am not able to join this webinar at the same time as my other fellow panelists as I'm traveling, but I'm pleased that I could share this short video with you all. I will not talk many points from the report due to the limited time that I have. I am sure we all will get access to this report to inform the work that we do and the advocacy that we do for the Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar. With that, I would like to draw the attention of the ongoing human rights violations that our community continue to experience even after they have escaped to Bangladesh after 2017, which has not always been talked about publicly and raised awareness enough about and addressed enough about. But I would also particularly would like to touch upon the human rights violation that Rohingya women and girls experience that includes sexual gender-based violence perpetrated by APBN at checkpoints, including inappropriate touching, removal of clothes, sexual assault, and rape. It is concerning that none of this have been monitored systematically, and we don't have such a mechanism to monitor all this human rights violation, and none of them have been held accountable. Not only that, our Rohingya women and girls also experience harassment while they interact with the local communities. That needs to stop. On top of it, our women and girls are also vulnerable to exposed to intimate partner violence by their male intimate partners, which is one of the negative impacts of poor mental well-being of our men, as well as economic conditions of inside the camp. And also one of the other concerning negative impact is the child marriage that happened in the refugee camp due to the fear and concern for the security of their young daughters being exposed to trafficking and sexual assault. And of course, one other negative impact is as well trafficking of Rohingya women and girls from Cox's Bazar. All of this needs immediate and urgent attention. And none of this human rights violation should be normalized simply because our community have been in the refugee camp for more than 5 years, 6 years now. None of this should be normalized because it is urgent, it is unacceptable. As well, the persecution of our communities unfortunately have not ended even after we have escaped to this refugee camp to the neighboring countries such as Thailand, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. And the sad reality is that all of this human rights violation that our community experience have been very normalized. People no longer give attention to, and this is why this report is very important to bring, to draw the international attention back, so that the Rohingya refugee issues, particularly the issues of Rohingyas in Cox's Bazar, become invisible under many other emerging global and international national refugees and displacement issue. Also, I would like to touch upon the realities of the solution for our communities as well. Even if international communities, Bangladesh government, Myanmar government, talk about repatriation, talk about resettlement, we all know it is not going to happen immediately unless that repatriation process has been consulted, and that repatriation process have the mechanism of monitoring our successful repatriation, which will guarantee our community will not experience similar experience to what we have experienced in 1992. And the reality is that our communities is going to be wherever they are right now. And the resettlement, we all know, is less than 1%. So what we do need now is the support from the host communities, from the local communities, from the international communities, from the government of Bangladesh, to give us access to build our resilience, our capacity, and to be able to contribute, to be able to be seen as the complementary, not as the burden. We are not the burden. When our communities come to the refugee camps, to host country, to neighboring countries, we do not simply come. We also bring along our skills, our abilities to contribute and to be complementary partners of wherever we are right now. And the very fact that our communities do not have access to education in Bangladesh, in neighboring countries, although There are many international human rights treaty that say we should have access to education. It's creating lost generation of us again. If we do not have access to education, if we do not have access to livelihood, why and how can we expect our communities to be resilient enough and to be able to contribute to wherever they are right now? How are we able to be seen as the complementary instead of seeing the burden to wherever we are right now? How are we going to tackle this xenophobia against Rohingyas and resentment against our community? So I really would like to encourage to explore all the possible ways to help us rebuild our capacity, our resilience. Ultimately, of course, it will be us to rebuild our community, but we do need support from all of you to have access to basic right to be able to do so. And I also would like to highlight the fact that one webinar, one conference is not enough to continuously raise awareness of the human rights violation that our community experience, to continuously build the partnership among all the actors involved in resolving Rohingya issues. It is not enough. It is just a reminder for us to remind the people, hey, this issue is still there. It is getting worse. It is not getting better. We need to do better. We need to do the reality check. We need to come up with the practical, comprehensive, immediate solution, short-term solution, long-term solution for this community. So I really hope this webinar is again a reminder to remind all of us that this community needs urgent attention. Our community needs your urgent attention. Not only the attention, we also need the actions. So I hope all of us will remain to engage and to continue to work on finding solution and implementing solutions and practical support for the Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar. So again, I will repeat that the capacity of our community is rebuilt and the resilience of our community is rebuilt, so that we are no longer perceived as the burden of the host community, as the burden to wherever we are right now, so that we can explore the complementary pathway of contributing to the communities where we are, so that our community is prepared, whether for repatriation or resettlement or having dignified human life wherever they are right now. And please do reach out to me as an individual, as an advocate, or to Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network for future further collaboration, ongoing work, for the ongoing work that we all need to do together. Please do reach out to us. With that, I would like to call upon the Bangladesh government, international community, humanitarian actors, not to normalize the human rights violation that Rohingya community continue to experience, to come up with a whole of society approach to tackle this issue. And this time we can, so that we can come up with the comprehensive, practical and urgent solution, immediate, short-term and long-term together. And I hope this webinar is a reminder for us against the ongoing persecution and human rights violations that Rohingya communities continue to experience, and that we need your support and we need your actions, immediate actions, to address all of this issue. We have to stop feeling unsafe. We have to stop feeling uncomfortable to be vocal about all these human rights violations against our community. We have to be vocal. We have to speak and address this issue together. And with that, I hope to hear from all of you, from the audience, from the people who are speaking with me on this panel. And this webinar is not one of those webinars. We speak, the conference is over, we forget, and we normalize all this thing again. And I wish you, I wish this webinar is a successful one, and I look forward to be connected to you all and to continue to work on this issue, to address this issue, and to rebuild the resilience and capacity of Rohingya communities, and to tackle the resentment and xenophobia of our communities while we wait for a long-term, solid solution for all of us. And thank you.
An extremely powerful statement by Hafsa. We're very sad that she was unable to join us today, but grateful that she was able to record that short statement. She highlights some of the very unique and specific challenges faced by Rohingya women in the camp, and the report does go dig into this in much more detail. So we encourage you all to take a look at the report to understand a bit more about the unique vulnerabilities that women are facing in terms of sexual violence and humiliation by security forces. We have just only a few minutes left, and as a closing question, I'd like to direct an audience question to Dr. Sasa, as it relates also to Hafsa's statement. Hafsa highlighted that it is essential that we work together for both short-term and long-term solutions. Curious to know, what are some of the concrete steps and actions that the NUG has planned to help improve the situation for Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh? Dr. Sasa.
Thank you again for the questions. As you know, our country was for several decades run by the most brutal, oppressive military dictatorship. They use race as weapons, religious as weapons, and Rohingya community become the target of hate speech and the targets of this dehumanization, right? The targets of discrimination. So when we came to politics a few years ago, I'm sure you all remember just talking about Rohingya in official statement was not there. So if you ask us what we have done today, is that I think we have together bringing Rohingya official as a part of Myanmar, right? And then I think everyone here in the panel also will agree that that has been somehow overcome. Almost there was a stigma about Rohingya, naming Rohingya, calling Rohingya names. You know, it was not possible 2 years ago. So I think there's number one, what we have achieved is that now not only that, we have one of our brother Rohingya background, U Aujomyon, as one of NUG cabinet minister. So it is very, really, I think we have overcome some big things on that. And at the same time, our really desire is to inclusive future of Myanmar, where Rohingya are a part of the nation, right? So I think that is very clear in our position. And as NUG, we have to make it very clear of our positions to Rohingya, that our commitment is for justice for Rohingya. So example, talking about repatriations, we have made clear it has to be safe, voluntary, and dignified return. Unless that kind of situation and environment is provided, we cannot send them back to the killing field. That's clear for us. Just now, our sister spoke about, the same way. So I think for now is that, as I said, in terms of justice, at the same time, we are committed to fully cooperate with ICJ. And you know that we have withdrawn preliminary objections of Gambia cases against the Myanmar. We have withdrawn it. We have withdrawn it officially. We have made a statement that we withdraw it, the objection. And that means that we are fully for justice for Rohingya here. And also where United States of America make determinations about the Rohingya crisis amounted to genocide, crime against humanity against Rohingya. We make official statements welcoming of United States determinations of this genocide. And also we are saying publicly and make declaration that we will accept the jurisdiction of ICC. So when it comes to justice, you can see in a few years' time, we have taken that kind of very big steps that never happened before. And now you can also see that in this revolution, Rohingya also are a big part of this revolution for the future. Free Myanmar, free Rohingya. Yeah, so that is very crucial for us. Like Guni Salwan and all here, they all are a part of this big revolution now, which is a really great thing. And another point I like to mention is that Myanmar is multinational multi-ethnic country. Myanmar is a multi-religious country. Our diversity is our strength. That's why this is called national unity government. That means that we want united Myanmar from backgrounds of diversities, and Rohingya communities are a part of the diversity, which will make our nation strength in the future. That's what we are looking forward to. And the final point I want to make here is regarding what can be done now. I mean, as the report has come out from YCR, I think that 39 points that they make, it's all relevant to what we can collaborate together as one, right? As one. And from different level, example in the UN, we have got our ambassador Ucho Milton there, representing the whole Myanmar. And then Myanmar issue is very much Rohingya issue, also internationally. And then when we talk about humanitarian, also, as you remember, you understand, now we are not only 1 million refugee. Because of this military, now we are talking about 2 million the refugee. And then we have been advocating the international community should not cut the humanitarian assistance to our people. When I say our people, it's also Rohingya included there. And now we see the international community are cutting the aid towards Myanmar, which is really, really unbelievable. And that instead of decreasing, they have to be increasing. But that became opposite. And the other one is also, we have to cooperate in ICJ, ICC, UN channel. At the same time, we are closely working with the UN Human Rights Council and UN Special Reporter on Human Rights Situation in Myanmar, UNSR. So I think all those levels, we have to leverage as much as possible. How can we bring those into a complementary to Bangladesh governments when they consider this? We want, we are not going to accept our people living in that kind of desperate situation. Definitely it's temporary, yeah, it's temporary. When we get our freedom back, all our brother and sisters, no one will be left behind. We don't like to see anybody under that. So no one will be left behind. Our people are not for pushing to the no man's island, right? We will not allow that to happen in our watch anymore. So that is where the future we are building. So hopefully we will defeat this military dictatorship sooner than later and start building democracy, federal democracy. When we say federal democracy, we're also talking about all these repressive law, like 1982 citizenship law, right? Race protection law of 2015, and many other laws that are oppressive against minority group in Myanmar. So we open the door to all ethnic minorities, including Rohingya, to be a part of drafting federal democratic constitution even, right? So with that, now we have got FDC, which is a charter now. Soon, my ministry are going to organize town hall talking about a constitution of that we have, and that will be Rohingya will be a part of the process as well. So we really like to see greater engagement of all stakeholders and bring things together.
Thank you, Dr. Sasa, for that strong finishing statement and for that very that statement of commitment to the Rohingya people. We appreciate it. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I'm going to pass things over to Andrew Riley, just as the representative of YCR on the call, just to say a closing comment on YCR's plans moving forward following this webinar.
Yeah, so I know we're a little bit over time, but for those who are still on the call, YCR will continue to move forward with advocacy. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about their main goals and their perspective moving forward with this research and with this report. I think my main takeaway from YCR, and a lot of the panelists have touched on this, is that the situation is dire and the current approach is not working. YCR believes that there's a better way forward. And I think the hope of YCR throughout this entire project was to make the message so clear, authoritative, and unignorable that people in positions of power would be forced to act on this. And that message is that the government of Bangladesh is violating the rights of Rohingya. The YCR researchers risked their safety to put this research on the desks of those who can change the situation. And I think that they did that. And to some extent, that puts pressure on the rest of us in positions of power to carry those changes forward. What does that mean? I think for the government of Bangladesh, it means reversing policies that are causing so much harm and meeting with Rohingya to discuss how to change those. For journalists on the call, it means assisting with disseminating these results globally. For international governments, it means changing the status quo and putting diplomatic pressure on Bangladesh. And for UNHCR and humanitarian agencies, it means publicly stating often that Rohingya are not having their basic needs provided for in the camps, to make it clear that restricting their movement is directly prohibiting them from providing for their basic needs. I think at the end of this day, this research is a call to hold all of us in positions of power accountable for this unacceptable and ongoing crisis, and that they are trying to provide what is needed to act on this with urgency by giving us this data. So thanks everyone for joining. Really appreciate your participation, and I'll pass it back over to Kara to wrap up really quickly.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to a huge thanks to all of our panelists for their time and their insights, to everyone who has attended online. Just to remind everyone that the upcoming Rohingya language broadcast of this event is scheduled for next week, Friday, September 29th at 3 p.m. Bangladesh time. A recording of this launch, as well as a link to the report, I think has been shared in the chat. You can also find it on the Fort Facebook page. So thank you again. Please disseminate the report broadly. Thank you for your time. We appreciate your attendance. Take care.